The name Moravian Falls derived from a group of settlers who passed through in the 1750s. In the year 1752, Lord Granville of England granted 10,000 acres to the Moravians, who surveyed 8,773 acres within the boundaries of Wilkes County. During their stay, they fished and hunted on Moravian Creek. Due probably to the extreme winters and hostile Cherokee Indians, the Moravians made Bethesda at Winston-Salem their permanent settlement. The Moravian Falls community was known as the 13th United States Militia District until the outbreak of the Civil War. There were 110 men subject to bear arms in the year of 1790 during the administration of George Washington. The village of Moravian Falls was known as Forks of the Road, going back to the Revolutionary period and continuing until the days of the Civil War. A stagecoach road ran from Wilkesboro to Morganton and passed by the brick house built by Colonel Waugh that stood in the Forks.
Where the intersection is, where the run-in store is now, was an old house there that they called the Waugh House. It had been the home of a Colonel Waugh, who was a Revolutionary general. And I remember one time hearing a big commotion about him finding some George Washington letters in the Waugh home. As it turned out, it was copies of letters that he'd written to George Washington, and not the other way around, but they were still historical documents.
In those early days, a racetrack was located beside the Statesville Road, extending up to near the south side of the brick house, and races were held there. One road went to Lenoir and the other to Taylorsville, Highway 16 and 18. Later it was known as Petersburg. The beautiful cascade 1/2 mile from the village became Moravian Falls. The clear mountain stream, the east prong of which heads at Kilby's Gap on the Brushy Mountains, and the west prong at Russell's Gap, threads its way through wooded hills to reach the ledge of the falls. Around 1874, it took the name of Moravian Falls. Waugh's Mill was not the only one in operation along Moravian Creek. The little waterway powered several operations.
Moravian Falls was a very important place back in the 1800s because at this mill, at the falls, there were 4 different mills. There was a corn mill, a flour mill, a linseed oil mill, and there was a wool carding place. And at one time, electricity was made there.
The mill at Moravian Falls was driven by a 20-foot overshot water wheel. These industries were carried on from about 1828 to 1849. In 1882, W.C. Meadows built and operated a corn and wheat mill, which grew into a major mill manufacturing company. In 1918, after the other mills had ceased operating, the W.C. Meadows Manufacturing Company opened the R.C. Meadows Imperial Corn Mill at Poor's Knob. This mill was destroyed by the 1940 flood.
The Moravian Falls Water Works was incorporated on January 30th, 1964 for the purpose of providing clean drinking water for the community. The first board of directors was L.G. Critcher, Lacey Ferguson, Dr. Hal Hawkins, C.G. Glass Jr., Gaylord Hancock, Lloyd Perdue, Lloyd Phillips, Ralph Pierce, and Jack Evans. L.G. Critcher was elected president, Gaylord Hancock vice president, Lacey Ferguson was treasurer, and Miss Ruth Hubbard as secretary.
Moravian Falls Academy was built in 1875 to 1876 by public-spirited citizens of the community who realized the need for educational facilities.
Well, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the old academy that was at Moravian Falls because it was a very important part of the history of Moravian Falls. And it said that 2 of the older Spainhour members and a man named Green helped to establish the academy. And they had an agreement that politics were never to have anything to do with the school. They kind of had it sheltered before it got started, that the Democrats and the Republicans couldn't interfere with it. And so that school became a very good school, and students from from said Tennessee, Virginia, and South Carolina came here, and they would have to board in the homes because there wasn't a place to live. So they boarded with the families in the home, and I know that T.C. Hicks and Martha kept several of them at times. And that academy was right where the old Moravian Falls School sat. It's hard to tell you exactly where it was, but anyway, the new school sits on the same property. And my daddy went there in his younger years, and he got a teaching degree. And the teachers that were there were a man named R.L. Patton. That was one of his teachers. And when I became a teacher and I married Big Jim and moved to Morganton, I was hired by the second R.L. Patton. And then the third and the fourth R.L. Pattons are still there in Morganton. But that academy was very important in Moravian. And I remember Miss Thelma Laws said it added to the scholarship of Moravian Falls.
It was a boarding school from 1876 until 1906. Fees were a minimum of $1 per month, with the maximum fee not exceeding $4 per month. Moravian Falls Academy was discontinued in 1906, and a public school was conducted in the building. The old academy was torn down in 1927 to make way for a modern public elementary school. It stands near the Methodist Church and near the Baptist Church. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Moravian Falls was the home of 18 small newspapers: The Lash, The Whipsnapper, Suffragette, The Fool Killer, The Yellow Jacket, and several others. Ardon Law's Yellow Jacket, with its terrifying sting and hardiness, was probably the best-known paper, with a one-time circulation of 250,000.
The old Yellow Jacket office was still there, the building where they printed the paper. I don't remember them printing it, but I have some of the papers. It was a political paper and had a tremendous following in his time, Mr. Laws.
Mr. Laws published the Yellow Jacket newspaper.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and he owned the Yellow Jacket Lake.
Ardon Laws, editor and owner of the Yellow Jacket, said that a true history of Moravian Falls would read like an Arabian Nights romance. Villages and community centers invariably stamp their imprint upon society of either good or evil. It is when they become instrumentalities of advancement in Christianity, education, and industry that their names become worthy of a niche in the country's history. Such a place is the community center and village of Moravian Falls.
He wrote under different names, and he'd had like 5 or 6 different articles, and it was like it was a different person was writing it, but he wrote them all. And he was really good. He could keep each thing going as kind of a serial, I guess. And he picked up some man over way up about Tennessee somewhere, and he said he'd like to meet so-and-so, and whichever guy it was he wanted to meet, well, he just told him that's who he was, and went on with it. So, but he wrote several different articles.
From an early age, Ardon Laws was determined to be a printer. He carved type out of bark with his Barlow knife and made brown ink from the green shells of walnuts. In 1895, he bought a second-hand printing press and some type and started a printing shop in his farmhouse basement. Ardon Laws was a very active civic leader. He never left his hometown, but he brought it much recognition. He was a history professor, road commissioner, chair of the school board, and a loyal Mason. He served on the Republican Executive Committee and on one occasion attended the National Republican Convention in Chicago. Mr. Laws authored 2 books, Hot Stuff, or The Yellow Jacket Boiled Down, and Law's Anti-Catholic Dictionary. His speech on high spots in history was delivered all over the nation.
It had several tragic fires here in Moravian Falls because one of that service station there where the cafe is, a service station right there, hit burnt. And then the Yellow Jacket burnt one time.
The Yellow Jacket print shop burned in February 1943, but the paper continued publication with the use of another local print shop. But this was the beginning of the end, as the number of subscribers declined. R. Don Laws died in March 1950, and there was no one to replace him. The Yellow Jacket lost its sting and ceased publication with Laws' death. Right behind the Yellow Jacket in terms of popularity was The Fool Killer by James Larkin Pearson, Poet Laureate of North Carolina from 1953 to 1981. The Fool Killer was sent out to approximately 50,000 readers.
The Yellow Jacket Lake was painted on the side of the store building. And the Yellow Jacket Lake was on out the road from that building.
Another local influence on me was hearing about James Larkin Pearson and some of the early newspapers in Moravian Falls, and seeing copies of The Fool Killer that Mr. Pearson printed, and the Yellow Jacket that was also in the area.
James Larkin Pearson was born in Wilkes County on September 13, 1879, the son of William and Louise McNeil Pearson. Born on the Berry Mountain, he was delivered by a granny woman in a crude cabin his family called home. As Pearson would state in his book, "My fingers and my toes," so far as could be discovered by the granny woman and all the visitors, I was a normal baby. But about 4 years later, they were not so sure. One cold winter day, when I was 4.5 years old, my father had me out with him and asked me, "Jimmy, are you cold?" Without taking any time to study out my answer, it came like a flash. My fingers and my toes, my feet and my hands, are just as cold as you'd ever see a man's. Thus began the career of the man who was appointed as the second North Carolina Poet Laureate in 1953. In 2007, Mr. Pearson's memory was honored by the erection of a highway marker on North Carolina Highway 268 and Collegiate Drive in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. Senator Steve Goss was instrumental in acquiring it.